Now, I know I said recently fights that have been announced, and I think it's the fight that we've been waiting for. Feels like we've been waiting for our whole lives. No, no, that's an exaggeration, but we've been waiting maybe 5 years for this fight, maybe going on to 6 years. Errol Spence Jr. and Terrence Bud Crawford has finally been announced. It's July 29th. It's happening in Las Vegas, I think in the T-Mobile Arena.
Mhm.
How do you feel? Do you feel like it's buzzing? Do you feel like people are excited for this fight?
I would say there's definitely some steam lost
Hmm.
in the build up towards the fight, especially with so many things going on with Terrence Crawford's antics going to BLK Prime fighting, you know, I forget the fighting.
David Abenesian.
Yeah, Abenesian. Oh my God,
Mhm.
goes to show exactly what type of camp they're running out there. But nevertheless, yeah, kind of lost, and then the back and forth, and then it being announced, then people saying, "Oh, it's not happening. Oh, it is happening. Now it's not happening." Now that we do have it, of course, people are excited, but I don't think it's the excitement isn't as high as it would have been if it was announced, let's say, last year,
Yeah.
right? Or even prior. Now, I do think especially within the 4 years, that pocket of 4 years, I think some things had to happen in order to get the buildup of the fight to happen now, right? With Spence acquiring all the three belts,
Mhm.
Terrence Crawford just sitting on that one belt that he got from Jeff Horn for
Yeah.
all these years. But nevertheless, for them, the shit talking between the two all these years kind of helped boost some of the morale of the fight to a degree. But I do feel like it lost some steam for sure.
Yeah. I think it lost some steam, but I think you can kind of see PBC putting that budget in to try to build the steam back up. I seen they were on ESPN First Take, and it's not really a big. Well, First Take more so, but I also saw they were discussed on Undisputed with Skip and Shannon, which is not necessarily the biggest boxing platform unless it's a very big fight. Then they'll discuss boxing.
Right.
I think ESPN has a bigger platform. Of course, Terrence Crawford has history there. Stephen A. Smith had him on the show for their first, I guess, virtual face off.
Right.
So and I also saw like YouTube advertised to me like CBS talking about the fight. So I feel like PBC is putting a budget in to try to build it back up. But I do feel like it's going to start to build back up, especially I think they can't help themselves. I think shots are going to start getting thrown back and forth, and then it's going to get people in because I've had a couple of friends send me, like the announcement, and I'm just like, these are casuals. They don't really watch boxing like that. So for
100%. Me too. My way.
yeah,
Yeah.
so when casuals start chiming in, I have to say, okay, wait, there is something here. There's
Yeah.
something here. I can't think of the course of this 5 years. Of course, we want fights as soon as we hear about them. We want the fights. But maybe in 2018 or even 2019, maybe it wouldn't have been the best point for this fight to happen. I can't think of what year would have been best, to like capitalize on all
Yeah.
the momentum. But
Yeah.
I do think it's building back up slowly but surely. And I think we're in for like a spectacle July 29th.
Yeah. I 100% agree, especially when you're factoring Errol Spence getting into that car accident, right? And then, of course, coming back immediately taking that Dana Garcia fight. Maybe you can argue right after that, but then he got hit with a torn or a slight tear in his retina,
Yeah.
which, of course, took him out as well. So when you factor all these things in, it's like, the timing now might be better than ever, or possibly last year, right before the Ugas fight, it could have happened. But I would probably say it definitely could have happened even when Terrence Crawford decided to fight David Abenesian, right? It could have happened then. Nevertheless, it's here now. I'm excited about it. And I do agree. I'm inclined to agree with you that they can probably pick up the steam back up. I do have a question for you. Do
Yeah.
you think the fights that's happened thus far this year with Tank Ryan, Loma, Haney, do you think it took away some of the steam as well? Right, some of the fans have been hungry for some of the big fights, and that hunger has been somewhat satisfied by some of the big fights that already happened. Do you think that hindered the Spence versus Terrence Crawford fight, or do you think it actually amplified the hunger?
I think it amplified it because I think with us getting those big fights, Benavidez Plant, Garcia, Davis, Lomachenko, Haney. I think fans were going to start to put scrutiny on Spence and Crawford again. Like, how are all these fights happening and you guys can't make that fight happen? Another fight flying under the radar just hasn't taken place yet. Fulton Inoue coming up, but nevertheless, you know what I'm saying, we got all these big fights. So I think they were going to put a lot of scrutiny, you know, and then boom, guess what? It's here, you know what I'm saying? So I think it's actually amplified by all those big fights, you know, low key, you know, nobody wants to say it, but Ryan Garcia saved boxing. No, I'm joking. I'm joking, but you know, him agreeing to all terms or whatever he did, you know, just making that fight with Gervonta Davis and people seeing what that fight did, I think a lot of people are like, nah, we can't wait no more. We got to make these fights happen and we got to get this money.
Yeah. Whether it's, 850 or above 800 pay-per-view buys, or it might be, might be a miss with 150, pay-per-view buys. It happens, right? With the Loma and Devin Haney fight. Regardless, we're still getting the fights that we want to see. So it's definitely exciting. Now, I do want to ask you about this as well, because you did bring up the interview that Terrence Crawford and Errol Spence did with ESPN. I also seen that they're also doing interviews on other platforms, especially with Terrence Crawford on he did a platform with I believe the platform that Gilly the Kid is on.
$1 million worth of game,
and I want to ask you about this because he mentioned something that didn't really sit right with me, right? Gilly, of course, talked about the resume of both fighters, right? And because we're getting the fight now, just speaking off a resume, who do you believe has the better resume, right, at this point in time? And do you think that plays a role in the outcome of this fight?
In my opinion, I think Errol Spence has the better resume. I think the guys he fought at 147 are just better. I know you can probably say Crawford fought Gamboa. I know that was at 135, but I'll like counter Gamboa with Spence fought Mikey Garcia. And I know Mikey Garcia is not a natural welterweight, but I just think Mikey Garcia is an overall better fighter than Gamboa.
Okay.
And I think at 140 he fought Indongo. Some of the guys Spence fought, you can also counter with that. Let's say another guy who's not a natural 47 pounder, Lamont Peterson, right? I think you can offset those. But then you look at what they did at the 147 pound division. They you can see some names, but I think you can't just take names into consideration without taking into consideration when the fights took place, right? So what you're mentioning is Kell Brook, right? They both fought Kell Brook, but Spence fought Kell Brook off a loss. I will say he fought off a loss of, he fought Gennady Golovkin. I feel like Eddie Hearn rushed Kell Brook into that fight, and Kell Brook was having success. He was actually up on two of the cards before the stoppage. And I think the other card may have been a tie or may have just had Golovkin up by a round or something like that. You know what I'm saying? But he came back down, and you can just see it in his performance. You know what I'm saying? I know one orbital was messed up, but that's not the same orbital that stopped the fight versus Spence. It was the opposite orbital. But you can just see it in his performance, how his performance looked. That wasn't a guy who was done. Kell Brook still at the time was considered the number one welterweight in the world, even with the likes of guys like Keith One-Time Thurman. You know what I'm saying? Versus when Crawford fought him, I believe Kell Brook's previous 3 fights were at 154, and even though it's only a division apart, then he had to kind of drain himself down, in his words, to fight at 147. And then like when the fight was announced and he's about to start training, he loses his trainer. It was just a lot of things that were off when Crawford fought him. So did they both beat Kell Brook? Yes. Do I consider Crawford's Kell Brook win credible? Yes, but not as credible as Errol Spence's Kell Brook win, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. And then, of course, you got to factor in the time difference, too. The layoff between, when Kell Brook fought Terrence Crawford. And when I say layoff, meaning I think he was coming off, 18 months going into the Terrence Crawford fight? So he had a long duration. Whereas, when he fought Spence, he was naturally 147 pounds, right? He just moved up to fight Gennady Golovkin. But prior to that, he was fighting at 147 pounds. So those are definitely excellent points. And then, of course, we're talking about Sean Porter. Spence fought Sean Porter before the car accident, but he fought Sean Porter when Sean Porter was still in his prime. Terrence Crawford, of course, that's the best name on his resume. And actually, he stopped. Sean Porter's father stopped the fight in dramatic fashion, but Terrence Crawford had a great performance against Sean Porter at the later end of the fight, whereas Sean Porter was having great success in the beginning, right? But nevertheless, of course, Sean Porter retired right after that fight. He was on his way out, right?
Mhm.
He didn't even mention it that he was looking to kind of, retire prior to taking that fight. He knew that was going to be his last fight, right? And then we're talking about what other fighters, Amir Khan out of his prime, right?
Mhm.
Even quit right after getting low blowed. I don't know if he quit. I don't want to say that, but and then you're talking about what Green Machine, David Habanesian,
Mhm. Jose Benavidez.
Jose Benavidez after he got shot and
Yeah.
he got a late stoppage. So clearly at the 147-pound division, Errol Spence clearly has the better resume, right?
Mhm.
Better decorated fighter. However, I think Terence Crawford also leans a lot on his previous accolades, being an undisputed champ at the low weight class division. So, I do think the experience is definitely going to play a factor. But I would definitely say as of right now, I'm just excited that we got this fight happening. So
Yeah. So actually, in my opinion, there's two things that I want to touch on. Will experience play a factor in this one? I'm not sure. I'm leaning towards no, actually, and I know that might be surprising, but the reason is, I'm gonna give Terrence Crawford credit here. I think he's just a dog, right? So I think even though he's fighting some guys that we probably didn't want to see him fight, some guys that some people may sneeze at, I still think he approached it as if those guys were real threats. Do you know what I'm saying?
right,
I don't think he ever took those fights lightly. And I think that's why we see the outcomes that we see with him stopping these guys who I think are not top tier fighters, right?
right,
With the exception of Sean Porter. I consider Sean Porter a top tier fighter. But like Avanesian or Jose Benavidez, so I think he approaches every fight like, nah, this is a real fighter I'm going up against, even if everyone doesn't consider it that way. So I don't think he's gonna be shocked, i.e. Devin Haney stepping in there with Lomachenko and seeing the level difference, you know what I'm saying, of fighting an elite fighter. So I don't think Terence Crawford is going to run into that issue. And I know I'm doing a bunch of circles today, but trust me, they all make sense. You mentioned earlier 150,000 pay-per-view buys. That's the alleged number on Haney and Lomachenko.
yeah,
However, I think allegedly that's higher than Crawford's ever done, right? I don't even. I think Crawford and Porter they said were like 125,000 or something like that,
those
or
lines,
maybe it was close to the 150. Nevertheless, right?
right.
So with that being said, what does this fight have to do to be considered a successful fight pay-per-view wise?
Oof. Of course, if they could beat what Ryan and Tank did, fantastic. However, I think Ryan is more popular than Terence Crawford.
Mm-hmm.
Period. Right. And I do think dance partners matter, especially
Mm-hmm.
I think Errol Spence is clearly gonna carry, the pay-per-view rides. Clearly, he's been doing big numbers, 300K, 350K. Even having fights at the Cowboy Stadium, which is huge.
Mm-hmm.
I would say for this fight to be successful pay-per-view wise, it would have to do, in my honest opinion, at least at the bare minimum 500K.
$500,000. Okay.
Do 500K minimum.
Yeah.
How about you?
So that's the number I had in my head is 500,000 is what it had to do. But right now, well, that's what it has to do to be successful. But right now, I'm on pace to thinking I think it's on track right now, and you're gonna be shocked because my number has never been this high. I think right now we're looking at maybe like 700.
Okay. That's not egregious. All
Yeah,
right, that's not crazy.
I think we're looking at
That's a very reasonable number.
yeah, I think we're looking
They
at
could do it. Yeah, they could do it.
700. And if the face off starts getting heated,
Yeah.
then you know what I'm saying. Yeah, because I think like these guys are both dogs, and I think they might be reserved, and I think there's a level of respect there, but I think there's a level of competition. Like if you say the wrong thing, I'm definitely gonna retaliate. You know what I'm saying? And it looks like Terence Crawford is, he's out here talking his talk. You've seen $1 million worth of game. He called out Boots Ennis, and I'm actually what you think about that, but in my opinion, I think Gilly and them were wrong because I feel like they called Boots literally just waking up, and he wasn't really ready to converse and debate, because when he said he's been calling out Terrence Crawford since 2018, that just seemed a little off to me, because 2018 I think Terrence was just getting into the welterweight division, you know. So I think the timeline was a little fuzzy. But I don't doubt that Boots really wants to fight, but I just think they caught him off guard, and then Terrence kind of like showed him up, you know what I mean? So Terrence looks like he's talking that talk right now. But what did you think about that interaction?
The interaction was definitely interesting. I do think Terrence Crawford was trying to play stupid. I mean, we all know Boots in this team was definitely calling out Terrence Crawford for the longest, him and Spence, right? Let's not act oblivious. And the fact that he tried to just brush it off like, come on, don't play stupid, Crawford, right? You know, they even reached out, like Terrence Crawford's team actually reached out to Boots' team, you know, to see if he can fight on the BLK Prime app and to leave Showtime, you know. But like Bozy said, which is Boots' father, he said, no, he's not. He's loyal to his network, but, you know, contact, you know, Showtime rep, you know, the promoter, and try to get the fight happen, which they did. And then they just stopped responding, right? I'm not sure if Terrence Crawford is oblivious to it. I highly doubt it, because we've seen time and time again where Terrence Crawford make these statements and tries to play victim, and the truth is in the pudding, right? Like, it's clearly obvious what you're doing at this point. You're just trying to save face. Like, come on, stop it, you know? So I do think, you know, it was just one of those situations where I think Terrence was trying to play dumb and trying to go into the realm of, oh, well, you was calling me out, but where was the contract? Like, try to play, you know, play on semantics, and, you know, so that's what I took from it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I just didn't like them catching Duran off guard like that. I mean, but I'd rather it be authentic too. I didn't want, you know, I don't want it to be staged, but I feel like Duran does want the fight with Crawford and Spence. I don't know if he's always going through the proper channels. That much I don't know, but I just thought, you know, in the interview they made him look bad. He really looked like, nah, he wasn't about that smoke when it came to just how that dialogue was. I definitely think Terrence Crawford won that dialogue. But
yeah, casuals for sure.
Yeah.